darkmyths.org and Neapolis Media Group proudly present to you the Lone Gunman Podcast, featuring your host, Rob Clark, where research comes to shine and myths come to die. Stay tuned. Be right there.
What is up, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is the Lone Gunman Podcast, backed by popular motherfucking demand. Got a great show for you today. I got an old friend returning to the show. That's right, I'm sure you've heard of him before. Fresh off of his stint doing a little talking down in Dallas is my friend, author Carmine Savastano, author of Two Princes and a King, and proprietor of the Neapolis Media Group. Carmine, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Rob. Glad to hear you back.
Well, it's good to be back, I think. We'll find out. You know, I'm still working through these technical difficulties, as you can tell.
Well, I think everything's going to work out. But like I said before, it's great to have you back, and I know that a lot of people are happy, and I'm sure there are some myth makers that are not.
Yeah, well, screw them, so. Sorry they don't like it. You know, it's nice to have to hear people that have an honest opinion that'll tell the truth about people instead of just kissing their ass based on stories, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's unfortunate. Yeah, and I know you and some of the people that, I've also got to work with, like Chuck and Mike Swanson, Larry Hancock. I know you guys have seen, as overwhelmed as I was when I first came into all this, back a few years ago. I can only imagine, like with Larry, imagine having to watch every bad idea since the 60s.
Yeah. I'm surprised he's still alive, having to go through all that.
Yeah, or mentally that's got to be exhausting.
Or not in a little padded cell somewhere, So props to the OG original researchers, although most of them, well, I won't say most, a lot of them old school guys might have a little crazy theories as well. I mean, we've heard them all.
The original Robert Morrow.
Yeah. I mean, one thing time does bore out is some of the, more ridiculous theories that are quite apparent to us now, thank you to technology and other resources that we can point to that, can say, hey, maybe it wasn't the driver that turned around and shot JFK, or maybe somebody wasn't dressed up as a tree on the grassy knoll shooting, things like that.
Yeah, random groups of men with guns just wandering around, firing everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine Dealey Plaza, there was 15 to 20 shooters and like 50 spotters and, everybody there was in on it. And
if you'd like to hear other great ideas from James Fetzer.
Yeah. Ruby was an FBI guy named James Bookout, and, I mean, it's just...
Yeah, you got Sinkay trying to do that now.
Well, yeah, surprising enough, even Judy had enough common sense not to have that idiot at her conference, talking about that. Maybe her one...
Well, she... apparently even she has some standards.
Yeah, and that's saying a lot. A lot. Okay, Carmine. Well, look, let's do a little shout out here at the beginning before we actually get into some stuff. You can hear Carmine also over on American Freedom Radio on the Ocelli Effect as well. Just about, what is it, every Thursday night?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, every Thursday. And actually now they don't have to go to American Freedom Radio. They can go to Ocelli.com.
Oh, okay.
And it'll all go through there. I believe American Freedom Radio still carries some of the shows, but yeah, now it's pretty much at the website. And then he's got, and he's got affiliates like you do like you guys have Dark Mist. So I think that, and of course the Nance Media Group, which I'm happy to hear every time I hear your show.
Yeah.
But yeah, and yeah, they can hear me over there on Thursdays. And I'm glad to be returning back to your show. And I'm going to be another show that you've done before. I was talking to him the other day. Hopefully around February, I'm going to get to do Pirate Radio.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, those guys are cool. And I'll bring it up real quick. When I find out exactly where it's going to be appearing, and I'll put it on YouTube. While I was down in Dallas, I also got to do an interview show for TV. So once I get that, yeah, I'll put that out and show it to everybody. It was I don't want to like jump ahead, but well, you know what, it happened before the conference, so I suppose it's chronologically correct. So yeah, I went there and I got to talk to some people like Jefferson Morley and that, but surprisingly, Dave Perry was there. And Dave Perry, yeah, is known as they called him a master debunker, and he's known as somebody who once believed in conspiracy but now doesn't. But with the stuff we were talking about, I was just happy, and hopefully when people see it, they'll be happy to see that he basically doesn't disagree with most of what we say, because none of us are saying anything crazy. There are no 16 shooters. Yeah, we're just like, one of the things I said is nobody has the definitive evidence right now, and I know a lot of people on the official side don't like to admit that, but that's the truth.
Yeah, it's hard to
until
argue,
either side has. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's just, it's hard to argue when you have primary source documentation, and that's why a lot of these guys just go after the easy targets.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Sinkays and the Fetzers and the Liftons and all these other guys.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of people that they want to say that they have that, and that doesn't seem to have changed much either. Because I know long before most of us got into it, there were people who said that they had this solved back in the '60s.
Oh yeah,
and they clearly didn't.
No, they clearly did not.
There's always going to be another person that says, "Well, I'm the key to everything, and I have all the answers. I don't have the evidence," and that's where they always fall apart. So, I would warn people to always look for that. If they don't offer you that smoking gun piece of evidence that you can go and verify independently, then they don't have the keys to the case. They're just making stuff up to get your attention.
Good golden rule to live by when researching this case, for sure. But so yeah, definitely had a blast with Jaffe and the guys over at Pirate Radio, and I did them last year for their JFK special, which you can find on YouTube somewhere.
I linked it to the NEMG interview appearances. So at the Neapolis Media Group account, you can find Rob's interview.
Sweet. Yeah, that's out there. That was basically a primer for those guys, because a lot of those guys aren't really heavy into it. So, it was nice for, to dispel some, commonly held myths on their show about a lot of stuff and blow some minds over there. And, of course, also, everybody, if you're not checking out Doug Campbell's show, The Dallas Action, I don't know what you're doing. They've been going through a lot of the new files over there and coming up with some very, very cool stuff. And I was on his show a couple weeks ago, and we got into some stuff. And, definitely be checking that out. And also head over to my friend S.T. Patrick's show, the Midnight Writer podcast. You can find their stuff at Midnight Writer, not Writer, MidnightWriterNews.com. So check that out. They're doing some good interviews over there. Great shows. And so, yeah, definitely check them out. So now I wanted to have Carmine back because, of course, Carmine, we've had a lot of document releases, which is like your bread and butter in the past 6 months. And we're going to be talking about a lot of that stuff today and see if we found anything worth discussing. So let's get right into it, my friend.
Okay. So do you care if I real quickly just talk about the conference a little bit?
Oh, no. Please do.
Okay. I'll figure I'll go from that. I'll jump into something I found back in August and then get into the new documents. So please, everyone, bear with me. The older document thing might take a little bit, but I'll go through the conference fairly fast. So, yeah, basically I was
So hold on, Carmine. Now, did you have fun at Judy Baker's conference?
Nice. Well, no, because it was blocks away from where I was the whole time.
Oh. Oh, you
no, I
were
went to
Lancer.
the Lancer conference.
Oh, you were at Lancer. I thought you
but
spoke at Judy's conference. Oh, my God.
No, but I did hear there were fireworks there. I was sorry to miss them.
Yeah, me too. And boy, I wish I could talk about it right now. I'm just waiting for confirmation.
So, yeah. So, I had a lot of fun. I could have used some more sleep, but that's what those conferences are for, is basically getting that much sleep and trying to talk to as many people as you can.
Late nights, early mornings, lots of drinks.
Yep.
I know it.
So it was cool to meet Chuck Ocelli and Mike Swanson, especially after talking with them for so long. And it is definitely on my list of plans to meet you as soon as I can, sir, and everybody in the Annapolis Media Group.
Well, Carmine, there's another conference coming up in March, and it's about 45 miles away from me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, all you got to do is come right down to Dulles Airport and hop off the plane, and I'll be there, and we can go to the conference together. That would be awesome.
I think I know what conference you're talking about.
Yes.
The round 2 conference that's going to be happening in March, apparently.
Yes, the JFK Historical Group is putting on another historic conference in D.C., starring the likes of Roger Stone, Judith Berry Baker, Phil Nelson. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, it's star-studded, dude. I'm telling you. We don't want to miss it.
I'd say more rhinestone-studded, but... Yeah, that's going to be...
for your pleasure.
That is going to be an interesting gathering, I'm sure.
It's so close, dude. I really want to go. I mean, I don't think Denton will foot the bill like he did last time, but I'm just wondering if I should even bother going, or if they'd even let me in the door.
Yeah, exactly. Security. That was one of the reasons, because, as you know, Chuck wanted to stop by just to see what the circus looked like, but that was one of the reasons why I didn't go over there, because I just figured security would grab us as soon as I'm sure there were wanted posters on all the walls.
Ed Tatros, the security guard, waiting at the door. No, you can't come in here.
Hey, is that a book?
Park your car
Have you been
over
reading
there.
about facts? You need to leave all your evidence outside of the conference, please.
No recording devices at all.
But yeah, so... Yeah, so that was going on. Yes, needless to say, I didn't make the circus.
And you didn't run into any of the into any of the Facebook crazies, like out in the plaza anywhere?
No, but Chuck and Mike told me that they later, because I leave early on Sunday, but they ran into a couple of those guys, and just also the random guys that are just trying to sell newspapers and stuff. Down in Dealey Plaza.
Marty Eichler. Nice to meet you. I'm an asshole on Facebook, but in real life, I'm not that bad a guy.
Do you have to bring up the one that's in my state?
Sorry. I know he's a frequent visitor. I'm sure he was wandering around there sometime.
I wouldn't be surprised. Well, that was one of the things. Yeah. So on the first day, I got a chance to hear John Newman talk. Then I got to talk briefly with Bill Simpich and Newman. And, as you know, I do, the cryptonym research, which they do, and Larry Hancock and Matthew Shuffley. So it was cool to get to meet some of those guys and talk to them a little bit. I got to see Alan Dale and Malcolm Blunt speak about the JFK records later the first night. Next morning, I spoke to a largely enthusiastic audience, as I told you about earlier, about official and public myths. I covered some ground that's familiar to the listeners that we just did a little banter on for about 5 minutes there.
Yeah.
Was among my topics.
Did somebody actually introduce you before you went up on stage?
Yeah, Larry introduced me.
Larry did?
Yeah, Larry Hancock.
Did he say, please welcome Mr. Carmine?
Ma che salut, c'est Laurent di Patriote qui va répondre à ton téléphone, sinon il va te faire sauter le caisson.
Savastano. Sorry, go ahead. Trust me, it's funny when you hear it back. I don't know if you could hear that or not.
No, I couldn't hear the drop, but I'm looking forward to hearing it when it comes out.
Okay, it was kind of a long one. It was just Larry Hancock speaking a little Italian in between your name.
Nice. I've told people about the shirt you want me to get to sometime. I'll have to talk to you more about that.
Oh, dude, we can make it. I got the app. We can order it off SnapT anytime you want.
But yeah. I'll always remember that when you said that. So, but then I went later in the day. I went to Chuck's speech, and it was really cool. You know, he had a supportive audience, and everybody was talking pretty enthusiastically afterwards. And then I got to see Bill Simpich, and they talked about the mock trial that they had in Houston, which I would suggest people can find on YouTube. That's it was another interesting thing that went this year. It was a hung jury, but I think that is the worst that those who support conspiracy can expect, because there's just so much evidence for reasonable doubt if we actually use criminal standards.
Well, yeah. And
I think that's why the commission couldn't use it. Besides Oswald being dead, that's one reason, of course. He can't have a trial. But normally, as you've seen with, I can't remember, was it the Aaron, and I suppose it depends state to state, but the Aaron Rodriguez case where he killed himself so that he wouldn't be found guilty, so that his family wouldn't have their monetary rights taken away. So a similar thing would hold. With Oswald's death, he can't be tried, thus the presumption of innocence holds. Right. He's assumed to be innocent because he didn't have a trial. Now, I know people don't like to hear that or support the commission, but that is the way the law usually works. But if you lower the standards and use the commission standards, then you can start to change things.
Well, were they hypothetically reasoning that Oswald is alive during this mock trial?
I don't know. I think they were just acting based on what, if the standards were raised back to where they should be, what could the prosecution, and I think the prosecution was limited in some things too. Like they couldn't have the, just decades of firing that the officials have had from investigation to investigation trying to label Oswald as the only possible suspect. So in this case, we actually,
because I always thought, there's a lot of that first and second day evidence that the Dallas police handled that probably wouldn't be admissible in court due to chain of evidence or chain of custody. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of doubt that can be thrown on, the bullets and the rifle and all that stuff. So
yeah, the boxes, the fingerprints, the stuff they said that and if you look in their files too, they admit that it was a day-to-day thing. Like they didn't do everything they were supposed to on the first day, so they went back the second day, realized that photographers had been all over the place and reporters had been in there moving stuff around and setting it up for shots. So that was all tainted.
You said taint.
Nice. So
I mean, well, we all know that was Mac Wallace's fingerprint, on the box anyway, so I'm joking.
Or so Judith Baker and Roger Stone would have us believe.
Yeah. I can't believe that. Oh. Okay.
Yeah, for anyone that gets confronted with the Mac Wallace thing, look up Joan Mellon LBJ book. It will bring up her book. Where she went and actually got the original fingerprints that showed it in Mac Wallace.
And a real certified expert, which is important.
Indeed. You want to have somebody who knows what they're doing, not just somebody who's guessing.
Hey, so did you see Gary King at the conference at all?
I did. I saw him. I think I caught the end of his speech. I was waiting for the next event. But I'm trying to remember. Is that the guy who was one of the people who supported Beverly Oliver back in the day?
No. Gary King. That's Fetzer's buddy. He does the radio show with Fetzer. Gary King.
Oh, no. I didn't even know. Yeah.
Gauntly looking bald guy, loves to eat peanuts and shove nuts in his pockets for later. You didn't see him?
No. Yeah.
Wearing a Real Deal shirt.
Mm-mm.
You didn't see him?
No, I did not. I did not have the opportunity to see him, no.
Oh, man. He has like a 1990s DAT recorder, like this looks like a brick that he sits on his desk while everybody's talking. You didn't see him down there?
No. Who I did see was Mara was down there with the cameraman.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, he's important enough to have one, so that's good thing to document all this
that was
stuff.
just surprising because the year before he wasn't doing much, and then this year he had a cameraman.
Oh. So all in all, you had a good time at the conference. This for the second year in a row.
Yeah, no, it was really cool. And I got to meet more people this time. I knew what I was doing a little bit better, and I knew the area a little bit better. It was, although I got to see, like I said, a bunch of different speeches. People like Larry Hancock, Bill Simpich, John Newman. They did a tribute. Stu Exler I got to see too, who I know you've had on the show with that really interesting episode about Oswald's library card.
Oh yeah.
And they did a nice tribute to Sherry Feaster, who the listeners don't know passed away, and that was Deborah's sister and a forensic expert, one of the few real scientific forensic experts that has contributed a lot of modern information that we can use that's useful. So it was nice to see that. And
we lost quite a few this year, I mean, did you see Robert Oswald just died?
Yeah.
Yeah, Lee Oswald's brother passed away November 27th.
Yeah, that was, and he was older, but they're all, I'm sure, getting to a lot of the witnesses anyway, because I can't think that, we luckily do have some, witnesses left, but a lot of them are gone, and a lot of the officials are gone for the most part.
Yeah, they're getting up there in age, and so are these, some of the researchers as well, which always sucks, but...
Exactly. That's why we got to get as much done we got to get as much done as we want. And it's also, I think, important to note that, some people want this to be solved by the time they die. And I know we both do, Rob, but that might not happen. I'm hoping that's not the way it is. I'm hoping that, we will get some more of the connective tissue from a lot of these new documents and make some of the big questions come into clarity. But we also have to realize that, historical research is a centuries handing down thing. We're still looking into ancient Rome. So we're going to be looking into this a while still, but I think we can get some big answers at least in our lifetime.
Yeah, well, fortunately, we got a little bit more technology than ancient Rome had.
Exactly. And that's, I think, the big difference, too, between even the 70s and the 80s and the researchers of the 90s and currently. That, tech has made it so much easier instead of having, like Mary Farrell or Harold Weisberg to have to build an addition under our houses so we could put all the files in there.
Oh, no. Something that be destroyed by a fire in a matter of seconds, just paperwork after paperwork after paperwork. But we all stand on their shoulders, and here we are today. And that's why I always, say how important it is that, look, like people like me and Carmine and Doug, we're relatively young, to be in this scene. Like, I know you know what I'm talking about. If you go to a conference, it's like going to a rest home, sometimes as far as all the corpses propped up in there, but that's just the way it is.
That was more duties. Yeah. Well, and one of the things I wanted to mention too that was important is there are actually some young people this year, which I thought was great. I only saw a couple last year, but I actually saw a few teenagers. I saw a kid with their parents. So good. We are making progress. Yeah. And it's because of, shows like Rob's show and, Chuck's show. There's a lot of shows out there that really do, get new people's interest, which is important. We have to engage not just the public, but also younger people because, it's not a good thing when you go to a conference and me or Rob is one of the youngest people.
Yeah.
You want to definitely have that next generation there too.
Yeah, and they kind of look at you like, who's this little young whippersnapper? Thinks he knows everything. I've been looking at the case for 54 years.
Yeah, well, as you know, that's one of the things that some people online like to say too, is as if it's a seniority battle.
Yeah. But excuse me, sir, I know you've been looking at the case for. Have you ever been on a computer in the past 20 years?
Yeah, well, or looked at the new documents. I mean, okay, if you can't use a computer, have you printed out, the new documents.
No, I read books, Sonny. I know.
And
I
yeah,
write letters to people.
That's what, not to everyone's happiness, but I know that some people don't like that I always try to go back to documents every time. But I think that's what we have to do, because then there's no interpretation. That's the problem with just reading books. I think some people's books are great. I think, of the maybe 5 or 10 I've read, when I've gotten them, suggestions from you or Chuck or someone that I trust to suggest a book to me, I'll read it. But for the most part, I stick to the documents just because no one's interpretation gets in the way. You see exactly what was said.
Exactly. And that's the way it needs to be, from here on out, I think. Books are great.
If we're going.
But it's nice to have things, in your hand or on your screen that you can point someone in the direction to, and just really they can't argue about it, like you were saying with Dave Perry. Guys like that, they can badmouth us all day long, but when you've got truth and actual government documents on your side, all they can say is, well, that somebody must have faked that document.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, and everybody, they can criticize whatever document you use, but unless they have something just as compelling and just as verifiable.
Where'd you find that document?
Yeah, well, and that's why it's important too that we want to use verifiable places. NARA, the Mary Farrell Foundation, the Assassination Archives Research Center. Places that scholars are working, that have got the exact thing from the government and posted it without alterations, because we see that on Facebook a lot. I'm sure you do, and I have a bunch of times, where you'll see people take pieces of documents and put them together, make a new fake document that has everything they want in their story.
Oh,
so
just a couple months ago, when I guess maybe a month or two ago, in the National Enquirer, they had the McCone rally document in there.
Oof.
As proof, that Oswald worked for the CIA, and they were going through it all, and that was the same one that had Judy in it. And yeah.
Which, the McCone Rowley, and as I'm sure many out there already know, is a fake document. It is a combination document where, you got Secret Service numbers and other agency numbers mixed together. You've got, protocols that would be used in an FBI document or another agency's document mixed in with it. And you can tell just because there's no verifiable path to where the original is. So if there's no original a verifiable place, who cares? It's just Photoshop.
Yeah. Well, Robert Groden would beg to differ with you, but.
Oh, I know. I saw that. Did you see that special they did on him on YouTube? That's where I saw him talking about it.
Yeah, well, no, I actually heard him about it over on the Midnight Writer podcast. He had him on a couple weeks ago. I was talking to him, and look, I'm not, I don't like to badmouth people that have done a lot of great stuff for research. I think it's a great thing that Groden goes and sits in Dealey Plaza, on the weekend for the past 30 some years or however long he's been doing it, and basically lost his family over the pursuit of the truth, and was responsible for getting the Zapruder film out there and all that. But, here we are, and, you're a photo expert. You can't tell that the McCone Rally document is a composite document with no verifiable, provenance. It's like, okay, if you want to hang your hat on that, that's fine, but, whatever.
Yeah, well, and the unfortunate thing is, like you said, he did a lot of great things, but sometimes, as we've seen with other people as well, they get to a point to where they've seen so much that either they lose heart or they just get tired or, they lose interest in continuing to dig when new things emerge. So they try to grab one thing, and it's convenient. The things like the McCone Rowley document are convenient because it's got all the flavors you want. It's got Oswald and the CIA. It's got them putting other plans down. But one of the huge problems with it is I believe it's only secret. And it's got every bad thing that would have been associated with the Kennedy assassination in one place, and it's secret, not top secret, which it would be. If it's all their secrets in one document, they're not just going to hand that out to everybody. That's going to be one that's the highest classification.
Yeah.
So that's one of the huge problems with it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and they probably wouldn't have even written it down, which we know was, a technique that they mentioned in the Assassination Guide and in other places. So it makes no sense. Yeah.
I think a lot of the people that are looking for smoking guns in these document releases are going to be greatly disappointed. There's no way in hell they would ever let us see any of this shit. Like, I'm sure if there has been a smoking gun document, on par with the McCone rally document, something like that, or we're never going to see it. It's been long destroyed and gone, I'm sure, if there ever was anything like that at this point.
And I think people need to realize too that it was like I would agree with that assessment. I would say it was likely one or the other. It's either it was destroyed in the first round of destruction that happened just after President Kennedy, when the CIA investigation went on and certain documents were taken out, or when Nixon got rid of Helms and he destroyed a bunch of documents, MK Ultra and other stuff that all got destroyed then. And I'm sure there's also a period after a certain time the CIA just destroys things. If it is no longer legally, they're allowed to. If it is no longer considered pertinent to the file, they can consolidate them and destroy things.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, and just going through a lot of what was released is it's a lot of anti-Castro Cuban activities. A lot of these guys are still alive or were alive into the 90s and early 2000s, and it's a lot of basically methods and plans and things like this, and how they use informants, and there's a lot of informant based information in these releases as well, which of course is not verifiable information, it's hearsay, but some of it's interesting, and I think we're going to hear a little bit of it today. So let's get into a little bit of it.
Okay.
30 minutes into the interview.
So, well, we had to catch up. It's been months and months since we've talked.
I know, we got plenty of time.
I'll try to give you the short version. I'm going to hit the. So real quick, I wanted to discuss some of the things that I found in the older files since the last time me and Rob had a chance to talk. And it was this past August, before the new files emerged, a person that I had mentioned, and if you actually go back to Two Princes and a King, I don't mention him by name because I didn't know his name then, but it's a person I mentioned in the book that was the unidentified large man spotted near Ackerd and Commerce Street on November 22nd, 1963. I put him in the book because when I noticed that this person with a rifle was, only blocks away from Dealey Plaza and was unidentified, I thought that was notable.
Right, and everybody seems to think that it could be, could have been like Jerry Hemming, or somebody sent there to maybe impersonate Hemming as a patsy or something along those lines. But yeah, let us know what you found.
Okay, well, as people know, some have attempted to place others or themselves in Dealey Plaza with an assigned motive, means, and opportunity, but in every instance, problems exist with one or more of the essential requirements. No suspect has ever possessed all the elements necessary for definitive criminal guilt, and this includes Lee Harvey Oswald. Right. So the majority of suspects often present, are going to give us dead ends relying on endorsements or popularity. However, interesting figures and potential suspects, I would contend, do exist, often hidden in the legal record. John Henry Hill was a wealthy Texas citizen who owned a significant oil and mineral rights interests, and was a partner in an operation of the Dallas-based Southwest Production Company. During 1962, Roger Tittle, a repeated business associate of John Hill, was president of the Panhandle Steel Company. Tittle reported to the FBI that Hill made repeated public threats against President Kennedy during a prior dinner arrangement. Now, these are in FBI files. Hill allegedly criticized what the president was doing to the country regarding desegregation and blamed him for bringing communists and socialists into the government, and that Kennedy's comments were affecting his business interests. Tittle then offered that Hill said, "You better do something to get this stopped because I know several oil men who have what it takes to get the president assassinated." Reportedly at this point, Tittle's wife burst into tears and she and Mrs. Hill left the table. Despite the recorded drinking at dinner, Tittle advised that Hill was sober when he made the threat and told Hill it was a breach of law to do so. Tittle states that Hill prior drastically switched from a Democratic supporter of President Kennedy to a Republican critic when many of the Kennedy's administration policies adversely affected his business and threatened his view of American society. So Roger Tittle also states that his wife Thelma and Mrs. JoBeth Hill were present during the tirade. His wife Thelma, in a separate statement, corroborates Tittle's allegations. The last description Tittle gives to authorities of Hill is that he is an unstable but shrewd business operator. Of the other handful of witnesses interviewed regarding Hill were business associates of both Hill and Tittle. One associate, Mr. Gene Chambers, confirms that Tittle prior recounted the uncomfortable dinner episode, but Chambers did not directly hear John Hill make the threats. Business associate Oscar S. Wyatt, chairman of the Coastal States Gas Production Company, stated that he or Hill would have used the contacts with the Kennedy administration and not made threats. Yet, if Hill allegedly made the statements, it's unlikely he would have contacted the Kennedy administration to voice them.
Right.
So I just wanted to give you a chance, if you wanted to say anything. I've got a ton of stuff, so feel free to stop me whenever you want, Rob.
Yeah, well,
so John,
I think Chris Gallup talked about that a little bit at Lancer this year, didn't he?
Yeah, Chris Gallup was talking about oil men and like different, he had basically a bigger oil men based plot, and a couple of the people he talked about were Tittle and Hill,
right?
And at which hey, I'm thankful that people are talking about stuff that we discuss. So that's great. I'm glad that he was interested. He said that he came across Tittle a while back, but I'm just happy that I got to finally, help with Hill. And I know too, I also, though we were both pursuing it, and I respect him for his, reasonable disposition. Steve Rowe, when I put out the article back in August on Hill, he said, "I've been scooped." So I think Steve was on Hill's trail too.
So is one of these guys the big man that you were referring to in that one document?
Well, I'm hoping that basically I believe that I would contend that based on the evidence, he is John Henry Hill. And I think that's, here's some more information, and then I'll go into why I think so.
Henry Hill from Goodfellas fame, though, right?
John Henry Hill, the oil man from Texas. But you know what? If you type it in, trust me, I had to see so many things about Henry Hill trying to get to information about John Henry Hill.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because Goodfellas, yes, way more
Just
popular.
So we're not confused here.
Exactly. Hey, you got to help me out with this broad, Henry.
Bada bing, bada boom.
So John Henry Hill's recent former partner at the time was a guy named Joe Driscoll. And he stated that he had never heard John Henry Hill make threats against President Kennedy and did not believe Hill would undertake violence, but he admits that Hill is given to loose talk. So this might suggest Driscoll considered if such talk occurred, he doubted Hill would follow through with his loose talk, but it could have happened. And while Hill via Driscoll had contacts with some officials, he actually never met President Kennedy or associated with him. Additionally, these are merely business endorsements of Hill, not evidence of his actions or comments that can be verified. John Hill, in his own statement, offers he could not recall having been in a group where he was alleged to have made remarks against the safety of the president, and stated at no time was he informed by anyone that his remarks constituted a federal violation, which I think is an interesting way to answer.
Yeah.
He said he
making threats against the president was illegal.
He not only could he not remember making the loud threats against the president in public, but he also couldn't remember anyone reminding him that it was a federal violation to do so.
Or walking down the street with a giant gun strapped to his back the day the president's going through the city. I don't know.
So Hill advised that he was at a loss to understand why anyone should attribute remarks such as these to him, and added that it is in his opinion that the basis of these remarks probably began with people in the oil business in Dallas who were envious of his business deals or had suffered financial losses because of his company, which I guess is possible.
Well, it makes me think, too, Carmine, of the wealthy oilman who was arrested briefly coming out of the Dow Tex building. That was never properly identified, that everybody says was George Bush.
Yeah, which is, we know that isn't true because, the photograph, Steve Rowe, I also thought it was a great show that you did with Doug on beating the Bushies to knock down that myth some, because we know that he was in another part of Texas and actually called in. One of the things that annoys me about the whole Bush myth is that when people try to use the Parrott document for Bush calling in to report, but it's after the assassination and he's in Tyler. So how could he be in Dallas?
Well, he flew on a supersonic jet that got him there in 15 minutes, Carmine. Don't you know anything? I mean, come on.
Exactly.
Come on.
So
he's like Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, I know exactly. He's got a teleport pad. It was the '60s; they had one. But so
ask Andrew Passaggio, it could have been possible. He traveled through the wormhole with Barack Obama.
But
I'm sorry.
That's fine. Short of those. Like I said, we got months and months of jokes and stuff we need to get out of our system.
It was the Montauk Project. I mean, come on.
So Hill attributes jealous business rivals were responsible for the accusation, despite the information emerging from someone not in the oil business to whom Hill owed money. He also confirms that he may have stated the Kennedy administration was going socialistic, but denied that he said they were bringing communists and socialists into the government. Hill never denies eventually voicing serious fundamental problems with the Kennedy administration, but he can't remember if he made repeated tirades. He cannot recall, and he does not understand why someone would tell officials he did, but he claims he did not make a death threat. Yet even those who do not think he was responsible still commented on his unfortunate habit for loose talk and his public bravado. And thus, it's not unreasonable to contend that Hill made threats and accusations. If one believes him, they were just not death threats. One instance of serious disagreement might serve as a motive for seeking revenge on President Kennedy. While John Hill did indeed make significant profits during the Kennedy administration, he could have made substantially more if officials had not denied a business venture he collaborated on with others to undertake. During 1963, Hill and some business associates created a business group to purchase the complete oil rights in Texas of the Pan American Oil Company. They planned to reorganize the corporation and sell its gas to the city of El Paso at a large profit. While they attempted to finish the arrangement, the Federal Power Commission, according to Hill, prevented the arrangement with complicated procedures. Hill eventually abandoned the deal after his attorney instructed him to do so. He stated being disappointed and may have uttered comments about the Kennedy administration's socialistic tendencies. He also said having connections to President Kennedy and likely followed he also, as I said before, had connections to President Kennedy and likely followed financial news regarding his investments, and thus could have come across the announced trip and motorcade route from either source. Thus, we have a reasonable motive. We have multiple witnesses making legal statements to officials. We even have the possible suspect affirming he had reasons to dislike and perhaps even despise the Kennedy administration. He does not deny his policy opposition because of financial interests, but asserts that he never directly made a death threat. We even have his supporters' admission of unadvisable commentary when the moment strikes. Roger Tittle claimed Hill was unstable, just as some claimed Lee Harvey Oswald was. Yet, unlike Oswald, this man has a discernible possible motive. Mrs. JoBeth Hill told the FBI on the morning of November 22, 1963, she and Mr. Hill were downtown in Dallas. The Hills were shopping for a scheduled hunting trip and running errands. Mrs. Hill went to the Neiman Marcus store that morning and dropped off jewelry to be repaired. She then went to join her husband at Cullum & Boren's Sporting Goods on Elm Street nearby. She asserts it was just before noon. Yet this conflicts with the multiple times other witnesses offered who feasibly observed John Hill shortly later in the day. Based on the majority of related witnesses and corroborative factors that are available, it was more likely roughly 20 to 25 minutes before noon when she arrived at Cullum & Boren. The Hills previously had scheduled a hunting vacation at Vermejo Park Ranch in New Mexico. While Mrs. Hill was at Neiman Marcus, John Hill purchased a new, likely pre-ordered rifle, or one selected that was already prepared for use on his trip. Being a millionaire likely afforded Hill benefits a regular person's budget lacked, and he purchased clothing, ammunition, and other necessities as well. Mrs. Hill leaves Cullum & Boren likely by their own car because neither Hill nor his wife is seen overburdened with several bags of goods. All of their purchases had to be stored somewhere, yet Mr. Hill, who walked to the nearby Baker Hotel, retained at least one purchase. Approximately 3 minutes later, according to the President's Warren Commission, witness John Lawrence, at about 11:45 a.m., he and Philip Hathaway observed a peculiar man on the corner of Commerce and Ackert Street. Hathaway and Lawrence recount observing a large man over 6'5", exceeding 250 pounds, with a blonde crew cut in his 30s. He was dressed in a light gray suit and white shirt, fair-skinned, and walking in the opposite direction on the same side of the street. From Hathaway's perspective, he also observed the large man carried a rifle in a gun case. The case was possibly made of beige or tan leather with olive drab material. The men assumed this person was probably Secret Service, yet there were no Secret Service men reported in the area at that time. However, 35-year-old, 6'6", 280-pound, blonde-haired, well-dressed John Henry Hill was feasibly proceeding to lunch with his wife at the Imperial Club inside the Baker Hotel at the corner of Commerce and Ackert Street. The Hills likely sat down and ordered lunch by 11:50. Some questions presently come to mind. First, why did Hill bring a rifle to lunch? Did he store it elsewhere, or did he give it to someone? Additionally, why did Mrs. Hill never mention the rifle? Roughly 20 minutes later, at possibly 12:10 p.m., Mrs. Hill excuses herself and walks or drives to Neiman Marcus. From this point, no definitive evidence yet locates John Hill, and thus far, he remains unseen by anyone during this portion of the timeline, including his wife. Thus, we are left with the evidence present and can make informed deductions and reasonable approximations based on a short timeline. So what do you think of that so far?
Well, I think it's good we finally identified this guy. I mean, of course, he wasn't alone in his feelings about President Kennedy by any stretch of the imagination. I'm sure a lot of people felt the same way, and I'm sure a few others also voiced their unhappiness with his policies and his stance on communism and his he wants to cry about not being given a monopoly in Texas on the oil business. Sorry, buddy. Get over it. But yeah, I think it's interesting, because this, at least before, this guy has always been posited, it could have been Jerry Hemming, a big guy, 6'5", 6'6", whatever, short blonde crew cut, but, Hemming never had blonde hair, or maybe people surmise that it could have been, like a double, just to plant that seed that maybe Hemming was in Dallas with a gun. But I think it's good we finally identified this guy, even though I don't think anything sinister here. I think, like you said, he's a rich guy and he bought a rifle that day, and he's going to walk down the street with it. Dude, 6'6". Who's going to say anything to him? I mean, and this is 63. I mean, it wasn't a big deal to see somebody with a gun in Texas.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, yeah, I definitely don't think. I'm waiting for like I told Chuck, I said that whenever I go into a suspect, just because it's always happened in every other case when I've gone into them, I'm waiting for the thing that pulls it apart. And I haven't found that yet, and I probably will, but I just think he's so, the first thing I think is important is, like you said, we've identified him finally, or at least someone who matches. I just don't think there were a lot of 6'6", 280-pound crew-cut, blonde-haired men in suits with guns at the corner of Akron and Commerce at that moment.
Exactly.
Other people,
sense, if they were in town buying supplies to leave on a trip, maybe he dumped a bunch of stuff in the car. Maybe there wasn't room, for the rifle.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons
taking
why
it to show somebody. Say, hey man, check this out. Look what I just got.
Yeah. The only possible thing where I think it's highly improbable, but the only possible thing where I think it could be sinister is if he could have handed it to someone at the club and they did something with it. But that's, like I said, that's just speculation. I don't consider that. But the important thing that we've said a couple of times that I think is notable is that we finally can see who he is. So it's not just some unidentified guy that everyone can forever speculate on. So so Joe Beth Hill walks the block back to Neiman Marcus. Basically, also, one thing I would note to everyone is the distance. Whether or not, Hill has any sort of direct connection to the Kennedy case, anybody in this distance or closer has the ability to actually get there in time. So if we're going to be looking for suspects, they need to be within blocks of the assassination just before the assassination.
And it's important to also remember there's nobody we have no confirmation of anybody seeing a 6'6" guy.
Yeah, he would have stuck out
anywhere around Dealey Plaza, on the Knoll, in the Depository, in the Daltex, on Main Street, Elm Street, Houston Street.
Yeah,
I mean, there was a tall guy on Houston Street that people seem to think was Jerry Hemming in that one photo, but.
And I think he was Hemming. Don't quote me. I think between 6'2", 6'3".
No, I think he was about 6'5". I mean, he was a big dude.
Oh, okay. Oh, he was that big. Okay.
Yeah.
But maybe he was thinner then, because I would think that he was, you know what I mean? He was.
Oh, he was definitely thinner then. Yeah.
Yeah. Because this guy was just huge. Like, I can't even imagine. Most of the people then I would think are 5'6", 5'8". You know, maybe weighed 150 pounds, 170 pounds. This guy's just a monster.
Yeah, I don't think Hemming was 280 back then. I think he was probably about 200. You know, just tall and, lean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more soldier-like.
But, average but big. Just a big dude, Mm-hmm. Not muscular, not fat, but just a big dude,
Another interesting thing about Hill is he sells off all of his shares in the company the month before the assassination. Now, I'm not saying that has to be anything nefarious. It could have, feasibly, it could have been related to the deal that he lost. And he had lost so much money, he just got tired and fed up and decided that he was going to liquidate all of his shares so he didn't have to deal with it anymore, and just took the money that he could get out of it. Because he still did have mineral rights and other things, too.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. He was probably so pissed, he was like, all right, screw this. I'm selling off this shit and done with it.
Yeah. So, but I think one of the things that I like, like I said, he doesn't have to be any sort of a viable candidate for the assassin, but he actually has a motive, which I think is important for us to distinguish between him and Oswald, because Oswald has no motive. The commission's own psychiatric experts admitted they couldn't give him a motive. There's just no evidence for exactly what his thinking was, which is why we've seen people who want to support the commission say crazy, or, he just came unglued, something just set him off. I've actually heard someone say when he watched that program on President Kennedy on TV a couple nights before, it set him off and he just had to go after him, which, okay, well, if that's the case, then how did he do it all in the small amount of time that we know that he had to have had if he was a lone gunman, without practice, and then, it all falls apart.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Hill was the little interesting old thing. Let's get into the new stuff. And then there's an article with links to all the evidence that I gave Rob called The Man About Town, for those that want to read some more about Hill. To me, the craziest thing when I first came across that was just that his wife was like, oh, yeah, we were downtown in Dallas. He was buying a gun 5 blocks away from Dealey Plaza just before the shooting.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would plan ahead just a little bit.
You would hope.
If you knew the motorcade route and everything a couple days ahead of time, you might, if you're a millionaire, I think you probably either already have a shit ton of rifles, or you're not going to wait till an hour before he's coming through to go get a rifle. But yeah, I'm going to put up all the links to all these documents in the show notes. So anybody wants to check it out, just head for the show notes and you'll be able to find all this stuff from there.
Okay, so now on to the newer information from the series of releases we've been awash in since earlier this year.
Oh, yeah.
For those who have not, I know Rob knows already, but for those who have not been keeping track, I wanted to offer a breakdown of what's been going on. As many researchers and JFK advocates know, officials were legally bound under the JFK Records Act to release the remaining files in the case in the possession of the government, not released by the Assassination Records Review Board in the 1990s. However, and there's always a however, officials also could, under the law, continue to withhold files under certain circumstances that include national security concerns. While this might be legitimate in only the gravest of direct threats to national security, this case seemingly does not represent such a grand claim of security threat after the over a half century has passed since it began, and because a large majority of those involved are deceased.
Yes.
So the National Archives released its first round of documents on July 24th, 2017. They released nearly 4,000 documents. October 26th, as the second release, was a second release of 2,891 documents, and this was the legal deadline for the government to release all the related files in the JFK collections. Clearly, these were not all the remaining documents, which media and public sources and experts say range from 300 to 30,000 documents at that point still remain unreleased. Many were angry, outraged, and expected nothing further to emerge this year. However, after the media attention faded and the JFK documents sort of fell out of the public notice, they released 3 additional document releases with an overwhelming 25,000 partially withheld or withheld in full documents have been released in just November, and many are doing their best to wade through this huge information dump that just happened. So, of the 20, which goes to show you too that was the higher estimations, by people like Bill Simpich and Rex Bradford and others that said it was tens of thousands of documents they still had because they just dropped 25,000 on us, and they're still withholding more. So there's even more documents left.
Supposed to be more coming in the spring, is what I heard. They had 6 months,
after this.
Extra 6 months or so.
Which I don't think was a coincidence that the FBI and the CIA waited to the last day to throw in some last minute, we don't want this to go out, so they could get that extra 6 months to really – I think that really is what this is sometimes. I think the number that I read was 4. There are only 4 NARA people doing all of this. So they're going to miss stuff. We're going to get some good documents in there because nobody can read them, from top to bottom, all of those hundreds of thousands of different pages.
Or know what they're reading.
In that amount of time. Yeah, and exactly. Know how it relates to everything else. So many researchers have been busy offering the new files, and I wanted to cover some of the files I came across in the time since the last time we were really discussing the case. One of the documents I have prior discussed here and elsewhere is known as the Cassison Memo, which was first revealed by Joan Mellon in 2008. The document was redacted in some portions, and the name of both the sender and the recipient were hidden under pseudonyms. For those who are unfamiliar with pseudonyms, they're false names used to hide the identity of a person.
Now, wasn't Thomas Cassation a pseudonym for?
Yep. Yeah, Thomas Cassation was the pseudonym for the person sending the information, and Walter P. Heltigan was the name of the person who was to be the recipient of the letter. And the memo essentially states that the CIA Soviet Russia Division officer Thomas B. Cassison considered using Lee Harvey Oswald for intelligence purposes. However, many of the hidden details prevented the coded names and important parts of the memo from being understood. So when I first read that document years ago, I had talked to Chuck and Rob at various points, on the shows and elsewhere, about how I wanted to find him. I wanted to know who was the guy who said he was going to use Oswald, which goes contrary to nearly every agency employee that's been asked over the years. Even Cassison later lied about it, said no, he's not the sort of guy we'd use even after he thought about using Oswald in 1962.
Yeah, and trust me, folks, it's a name you've heard before.
So I started to do a mass stuff on Cassison. I'm trying to relearn it too because I called him Cassison forever because that seems how it's spelled. But Cassison I've heard is the proper pronunciation, so forgive me if I go back and forth. So years later, following the release of the new documents, I was looking within the earliest releases this year, and I came upon a version of the Cassison document that was not just unredacted, but also contained the written true names of those who had only appeared in pseudonyms in the other versions. The new version of the memo reveals that Walter P. Heltigan was James M. Flint, a CIA officer in the Soviet Office of Paris Station, who received a message from Thomas B. Cassison, a.k.a. Jacques G. Richardson. Richardson served the agency in Japan from 1955 to 1960. He then was transferred to serve in the Soviet Russia Division 6 as the chief of a Soviet base in North Asia Command. And according to Richardson, he performed espionage operations against the USSR during his service there. Now, during this same period, Lee Harvey Oswald was in the Soviet Union as well and drew Richardson's attention because of his strange behavior and his ability to leave the Soviet Union with a Russian bride and a new child on a State Department loan, no less. Richardson expressed concern that Oswald possibly was being used by Moraine to enter the West and become a Soviet sleeper agent. CIA officials had observed a pattern of Soviet women marrying Western husbands, and after relocation they would divorce these husbands and remain in the Western nations.
Ding, ding, ding.
Interestingly, Richardson did not mention that he was also running a tourist agent who, similar to Oswald, married a Russian national and relocated with her to France. This was the same country Richardson's next assignment would take him to, and where he retired.
All right, now hang on a second, Carmine, because was the name Thomas Kasasin used by more than one person as a pseudonym? Because
right now, I was just going to say the only person I know for sure that's used it was Richardson.
God damn, I should have said, because I could have swore I saw it in documents that it was somebody else was using it as well, and it's a name that we've all heard of before. Like, I wish I could remember.
I suppose it's possible. I know that there were some that were reused, but yeah, the only person that I linked, and it was totally by, like I told you, I was looking for him, and what happened was I found that first document, and then it was a struggle to try to find stuff about him, because basically he left, and it was only by chance that he had gone to U of M, the University of Michigan, which is actually kind of close to where I am, and he got into their student register as, they gave him an update on alumni, and he was an alumni where they're like, he just relocated with his family to France. Well, that lines up with this article I found in German that I had to translate, or luckily Google Translate's halfway decent, and found out that he'd also been in World War II, and then I just, started putting the pieces together on him. But that's the crazy thing, is that not only is he the guy who thought about using Oswald, he's the guy who thought about using Oswald while he was running a tourist agent like Oswald, that, similar to what Oswald appeared to be. And that guy also happened to marry a Russian woman at the time and happened to be able to get out of the country with her.
Yeah. Yeah, but if anybody comes across Thomas Kasasin, the name Thomas Kasasin, or Kasasin, or whatever the hell it is, associated with a different name than this French guy, Jacques Richardson?
Yeah, Jacques Richardson. He's actually American.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe his family was like heavy into France, and he ended up wanting to go there. So.
Yeah. If anybody else runs across anything about the name Kasasin being associated with somebody else, though, other than this guy, get at me or Carmine and let us know, because I could have swore I've seen it somewhere.
I'm sure, yeah. If they have a document, we're more than happy to look at it. You never know, that's happened in some cases. They've actually used the same name with different people, or actually two different names on one person to make it look like there's two people in the letter when it's really just one person.
Right.
So this is a notable error, too, I would mention to people in the original memo is Richardson says that he was looking during 1960, but it was actually 62 when he was really looking over the case again. So it was not too long before the assassination, which I would contend supports, since Oswald had caught Richardson's eye for intelligence use, caught the eye of others with similar ideas too.
Right.
I was able to track Richardson based on, and another crazy thing about this is usually, as I said before, most people that we're dealing with in this case are historical research only, deceased. But he's been writing books, and so after France, he basically went to work undercover as a non-official cover agent in the UN, and he was part of UNESCO, which, they were basically declaring historical sites, and he was writing books, and I found one book by him that was out as late as 2016. So it's possible he's still alive and in his 90s.
That'd be crazy.
Still writing books.
Yeah.
Yeah. I sometimes wonder if he has read or heard about anything when I've mentioned him online a few times now since August. I wonder what his thoughts are. I actually wrote I sent an email. I didn't think it was going to get through. I actually sent another email too to another guy that I had written about, who supposedly was still alive, Marvin. I'll have to find the name for you, but yeah, I don't think I'm going to get anything back from either of them, but we'll see.
They probably don't have computers. They're probably old school.
Yeah, that or someone's getting it for them, and they're not going to send that one along. I have a feeling.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, were you a non-official cover for the CIA in the 60s?
Yeah, I'm sure they're
so. So yeah, and then I put beyond the document. I also sent Rob 2 articles where it goes into some other documents, and you can see links from there. And which cover actually took him, because when he went to France, he went on the cover of an officer of the Conover Mast Book Company, which turned out to be another cover mechanism for the CIA. So another thing I wanted to towards for when they have time, I compiled from some of the new information. I compiled CIA files from the Office of Personnel, and that includes some of the well-known figures in the case, like David L. Christ, Lucien Cockayne, Gus Crozier, Ann Goodpasture, William Harvey, Thomas Keenan, J. Walton Moore, David Atlee Phillips, and Richard Snyder, and many others as well. It'll provide us not just with greater knowledge on our subjects of interest, but I come all of the CIA employee, officer, and agent files in one place. So there's a link to that too. It's called CIA Consolidated Files now. And I'm going to try to keep adding in time. As I pull up new names, I'll probably make an announcement once I get like about a dozen, and then just try to keep updating that. And I've read through a lot of them, but I'm sure there's stuff, one pair of eyes is not going to catch everything. So I would advise that if you are interested in these people, it's really worth going to the personnel files, because there's a lot of stuff that we're not going to see in the more general files that comes out in those.
And a lot of it's still heavily redacted as well.
Oh, yeah. You're going to find that, especially in people like Phillips. Some of those you're going to find 10, 20-page stretches where it's just basically redactions. But there are, I'd say, at least that, much or more in stuff we can read. And the important thing with those, I think, is it's not just necessarily what the documents say, but it's also the dates that were provided with some of the personnel actions. So we can actually find them where they are in the timeline, and we can track what they're doing. So when someone says, David Atlee Phillips is here, well, no, his personnel file says he's here, so this is where he is, rather than where people might say he was. And then moving right along, the final document I wanted to go over today, which I think is an interesting one. It regards the author and journalist Priscilla Johnson McMillan. Have you heard of her, Rob?
Yeah, name sounds familiar.
For those unfamiliar with her, she was a journalist, spoke 4 languages.
Didn't she write
later became
Me and Lee?
The original one. I definitely it's hilarious that you do that. Yeah, it's definitely hilarious that you say that, because I totally think that's where Baker got her idea for her book title.
Of course.
Yeah. Never one for an original idea.
No, the original title of McMillan's book was what? Lee and Marina, or
Marina and Lee.
Marina and Lee, instead of Me and Lee. Okay, gotcha. Gotcha.
Published in with a picture of them on the front smiling and all that. So, and
only
that
this was a real
published...
picture, right? Not a painting.
Exactly. Yes, this was actually a picture where those people actually knew each other.
Oh,
no drawings needed.
Imagine that.
So it was published in 1977, and McMillan offered several reports, articles, and interviews regarding her book and Lee Harvey Oswald. She actually spoke to Oswald shortly after he attempted to revoke his U.S. citizenship, and would characterize him as angry, but wholly endorsed that he was the assassin of President Kennedy, based on little more than official endorsements in her opinions. Many researchers for a number of years began to grow suspicious of McMillan's repeated endorsements, and some even alleged she was a knowing tool of the official narrative regarding Oswald. It turns out those who are skeptical of McMillan were correct, and Priscilla Mary Post Johnson, as she was formerly known, was a contact and source of the CIA. A new document from this year's later releases contains the notes of HSCA researcher Bob Gensman, and they regard the 201 file of McMillan, and reveal she applied for employment with the CIA in the early 1950s and was rejected for security concerns. However, she was later issued a provisional operational approval in the later 1950s, and she agreed to a debriefing at the U.S. Embassy before returning to the Soviet Union, and was debriefed by her, quote, case officer in 1956. She expressed a willingness to do what she could. One official comments she could act as a spotter and contact appropriate Soviets of interest. In 1958, she was suggested for use as a traveler and informant and proposed for clearance. In 1959, she interviews Lee Harvey Oswald hours after being tipped off by Moscow embassy official John McVicker. During the 1960s, she is debriefed, repeatedly contacted by the CIA, reports intelligence to them, and is cleared for use. She's also selected as the likely candidate to write an article in a major U.S. publication for the agency campaign, and officials she can be, quote, encouraged to write pretty much the article we want.
And the book we want.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think there are some questions about now people, calling her an unbiased critic. I don't think unbiased is a word that should be used anymore.
Nope. Not at all.
And yeah, apparently she, like I said, she was a bestseller. The question is, how many others might there be? I don't think we found the last one.
No, and as we, and as we know now, through things like Operation Mockingbird and stuff, they were using people in the media, in the news, in the newspapers, and in the CIA's employ to get across what they wanted to the American people and the rest of the world. So it's not a huge stretch, and it's basically another form of a way to shape the public opinion of a historical figure.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that, too, that those people, unfortunately, some of the people who probably at first suspected McMillan are no longer with us, but it did bore out that they had a reason to be suspicious. And it isn't just, this is another example of why people shouldn't just automatically dispel or disbelieve things because officials try to claim that they're the talk of a crazy conspiracist or they're the talk of people who don't know. Because actually evidence does bear out that
it's reminiscent of Clay Shaw a little bit,
Yeah, that he ended up being and that's the thing, is that I think a lot of people they might be suspicious and misinterpret why they're lying, but that they're lying is probably not outside the bounds of reason.
Right.
So yeah, no, I hope everything was interesting. And I hope everyone enjoyed some of the new stuff. And, when I come back, it won't be as long of a span. I'll have more stuff for you, hopefully. I'm going to go through, the new documents as much as I can. And as always, it's always great to be back, Rob. Get to talk to you for a bit.
Yeah, it's just like old times, huh?
Exactly. We fit in.
Hopefully
we fit in quite a few subjects.
The show sounds better. We'll see. We'll probably get done. It's going to sound like we're both at the bottom of the ocean or something, but we tried.
Hopefully, there won't be any technical issues this time.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. Knocking on wood. Fingers crossed. Because what you folks at home don't know, when I'm hearing Carmine talk, he sounds like he is at the bottom of a well. But hopefully that's not coming through on the recording. Hopefully he's coming in loud and clear. So fingers crossed once again. And what more can you hope for, right?
I just, and my final message is to the people at Skype and Spreaker, come on, guys, get it together.
Yeah,
you need an app that's going to make everybody sound great, that everyone can use easily. Come on, guys.
It's almost 2020. Can't we do this shit yet? Or, I'm just glad I finally figured this out, how to integrate Skype into Spreaker and actually record. So yeah, when I did it with Bart the first time, I think I was coming in really, really hot on my microphone level because I was using a headset. Now, talking to you, I'm using a standalone microphone and separate headphones. So hopefully this does the trick.
Oh, okay.
And I sound like I'm not coming in all eating the microphone all hot and shit like that. But Bart sounded great on his end, so hopefully you sound great on your end too when we get done this thing. But anyway, thanks so much for coming back, Carmine, and we're gonna have to do it again soon, my friend.
Definitely, I'm looking forward to it, and I'll keep my eyes on the files and let you know what I see.
Definitely, keep digging. I'll keep digging, and I'll send you if I find anything interesting. And I would encourage all the listeners out there too. You know, it's a team effort, people. So if you're looking through these files and you see anything that that we might be interested in or something you haven't seen before, make sure you send it our way. You can contact us very easily. How can people get at you on Twitter, Facebook?
At Neapolis MG is our Twitter. And if you go to TPOC, I've consolidated Two Princes and a King and NeMG into the TPOC site. So if you go to TPOC, TPAAK.com/NMG, and then everybody that's in NeMG, all the links for Rob and Chuck, for the Lone Gunman podcast, The Ocelli Effect, Debunked blog by Zach and Trish Fleming, Gendro. Also links for Charles Cliff and Matthew Shuffley's blog. So, come on by, and then you can check out the book, check out the primary evidence collections that I've added to. We've got hundreds of new pieces of evidence, not only from the new stuff here, but some of the older files, too, when I come across them. So, yeah, check out that. Of course, listen to the Lone Gunman podcast, and I'll have to hear from everybody soon.
Yeah, and you can find me on Facebook. If you just search for the Lone Gunman podcast, you'll find the show page, and I can be reached through there or on Twitter at TLG_podcast on Twitter. That's it, people. There's some bitches in the cam beamed up to satellite down directly to your ears, people. This is your boy. Peace.
Ma qu'est-ce que ça loue, c'est le rang des patriotes. Tu vas répondre à ton téléphone, sinon il va te faire sauter le caisson.